the Lord today.
Amen.
Be treated to some very good music and those are very lovely playing, so thank you. We're still in the book of Nehemiah, chapter 2. Promise we'll get to the end eventually. Chapter 2. We'll read all the way to the end of verse 10. Nehemiah chapter 2, starting in verse 1. And it came about in the month of Nisan, on the 20th year of King Artaxerxes, that wine was brought before him, and I took up the wine and gave it to the king. Now I had not been sad in his presence, so the king said to me, "Why is your face sad, though you are not sick? This is nothing but sadness of heart." And I was very much afraid. And I said to the king, "Let the king live forever. Why should my face not be sad when the city, the place of my father's tomb, lies desolate and its gates have been consumed with fire?" Then the king said to me, What would you request?" So I prayed to the God of heaven. And I said to the king, "If it pleases the king, and if your servant has found favor before you, send me to Judah, to the city of my father's tombs, that I may rebuild it." And the king said to me, with the queen sitting beside him, "How long will your journey be? And when will you return?" So it pleased the king to send me, and I gave him a definite time. And I said to the king, "If it pleases the king, let letters be given to me for the governors of the provinces beyond the river, that they may allow me to pass through until I come to Judah. And a letter to Asaph, the keeper of the king's forest, that he may give me timber to make beams for the gates of the fortress, which is by the temple, and for the walls of the city, and for the house which I will go." And the king granted them to me, because of the good hand of God was on me. Then I came to the governors of the provinces beyond the river, and I gave them the king's letters. Now the king had sent with me officers of the army and horsemen, and when Sanballat the Hornite and Tobiah the Amorite and officially heard about it, it was very displeasing to them that someone had come to seek the welfare of the sons of Israel. So we pick up here. Nehemiah is now before the king, and we end last week with that kind of cryptic statement that seems kind of out of place. It seems like it ought to be down in chapter 2. Ends with, "Now I was the cupbearer to the king." And a lot of times, and I've said this a couple of times now, when those statements are there in the text, it's not that the writer like has an ADD moment and just writes it in there. I just put it in there. He's actually trying to help the reader understand why this role is important. Now, if you look, there's about 4 instances where the word cupbearer is used. The more notable one is out of the book of Genesis in chapter 40. And if you read probably RSV or KJV or American Standard, it'll be translated butler. It's actually cupbearer. And what a cupbearer is, to set the stage, I mean, some of you may know, some of you won't, for review. What a cupbearer does is his job is to taste the food before it goes to the king. See, imperial courts are full of a lot of intrigue and a lot of, murderous plots. This is how Artaxerxes comes into power. Xerxes, his uncle, is killed by one of Xerxes' sons, and through political wrangling, Artaxerxes ends up being in charge. So you want to kind of limit, the number of people that touch your food, which is why if you read the story in Genesis 40, the baker and the chief cupbearer are thrown into prison. Those two dudes are the most important dudes in the king's servant, because the guy that makes your food, if he poisons it and the cupbearer dies, well, it's pretty easy to figure out who did what. So you kill the baker. If the baker makes the food and the cupbearer eats the food and he doesn't die and then the king dies, well, guess who you kill next? The cupbearer. It's a way of eliminating poisoning the king. You just eliminate one whole tier of treachery right away, because if someone screws up, they die. And so you have Nehemiah, but Nehemiah is not just a cupbearer. He's been the king's cupbearer for 20 years. You don't become the cupbearer for that period of time without developing a relationship. This is the man who the king places the trust of his life into concerning his food. And also concerned the picking of wine and goes with meat, which I would find would be very difficult when the king was having pork, because Nehemiah is not, well, good wine would go with pork. Red. Anyhow, he's Jewish. Paul, carry the one? Okay. It's a hard room this morning. And so he has the ear of the king because he will travel with the king. He's also probably a eunuch because he's going to be around the king and the queen and the king's harem. So he's going to be wherever the king is going to have a drink of anything or food of anything. Nehemiah, right there. You don't get to stand next to the king without having an undue influence, because he's going to be one of the only individuals that's with the king just about 24 hours a day. So that's why that phrase is so important. I've been the king's cupbearer 20 years. It indicates the responsibility that he has towards the king, and a place of responsibility that the king has in him. Because if the king had any issues about the man giving him something to drink, it's not that you get fired in the ancient Near Eastern world. Firing is a relatively new concept in the world. You don't get fired, you get separated from your head from your shoulders. And it came about in the month of Nisan, 20 years in the 20th year of King Artaxerxes, that wine was before him, and I took up the wine and gave it to the king. Now I had not been sad in his presence. So the king said to me, "Why is your face sad, though you are not sick? This is nothing but sadness of heart." Now, if you begin and go back in chapter 1, Nehemiah receives the report in the months of Shevel, I can't pronounce it, not even Hebrew. So you go back, you read that. Nisan is about 6 months later. So from the time he starts praying, it's about a time span of 6 months. Remember last week we talked about continual praying, and we talked about how we've developed into a culture that says, well, I've prayed once, that should be good enough for me and good enough for God. That's like working out once and expect to do anything. And so now here in the month of Nisan, he comes before the king, he's serving the king, and the king recognizes that there is something different about Nehemiah, and he says, "Why are you sad even though you don't look sad?" Now, Nehemiah goes on to say, "And I was greatly afraid." Why? Because in the royal court of the king, it is not allowed for you to be sad. The king does not like to be surrounded by unhappy people. In his court, he wants you all to have smiles on your face and post smiles on your face and be happy-go-lucky people, even though your world may be crumbling. Why? Because the king doesn't look at sad people. He's the king. Everybody should be happy. And Nehemiah recognizes that once the king realizes that he is sad before him and is unaware of his countenance, that he has now put his life in great jeopardy, because it is a crime punishable by death to be in the king's court sad or with a sad face. Now go back to what Nehemiah asked for in chapter 1. What does Nehemiah ask for? He asked for compassion or mercy before this man. This man is King Artaxerxes. He's asked God in his prayer that God would give him favor with this king. The king now recognizes that Nehemiah is now sad before him, and out of fear, realizes where he's at. But notice what happens next. Let's take a look here. This is nothing but sadness of heart, which is true, because Nehemiah's sadness is concerning about the gates and the walls of Israel. And I said to the king, "Let the king live forever. Why should my face not be sad, when the city of the place of my father's tomb lies desolate, and its gates have been consumed with fire?" Throughout all of chapter 2, or through this section of chapter 2, Nehemiah does not mention the name Jerusalem. Remember, the king has given an order, and we looked at this when we studied the historical part of this text back in chapter 1. The king gave an order that the constructions of the wall of Jerusalem was to be stopped, and the walls to be knocked down, and gates be burned. The king is not going to reverse his decision. Nehemiah knows to get the king to reverse his decision is very difficult to do. Matter of fact, almost impossible to do according to the laws of the Medes and the Persians, because once a law is given, they can't rescind the law. To go back to a good historical example of that, go to the book of Esther. Xerxes, the man before him, was tricked by Haman to allow the Jews to be captured, killed, and punished. And Xerxes issues a decree that says that the Jews can defend themselves, gather together, and defeat any army that comes in to defeat them. So Nehemiah knows Artaxerxes can't reverse the command given, but he can give a decree that will allow something to change. And so he doesn't use the name Jerusalem. Notice he talks about the city of his home birth. Well, Nehemiah is well aware that Artaxerxes knows where Nehemiah is from. He's a Jew from Jerusalem. He's part of the exile. From his father's tomb. These are key words that we're going to resonate with Artaxerxes, because the Medes and the Persians had a very large connection to the afterlife, and also understood that the tombs of one's fathers were kind of sacred. And so for those things to be in distress is kind of an appeal to the ear of the king. Now notice this. He doesn't come to the king and he goes, well, you ought to know the reason why, Hoss. You gave the order to wipe out the walls and take out the walls and burn the gates. I mean, if anybody should be mad, it's you. That's going to get you, in this world, well, it's going to get you killed. We live in a culture today where we have eliminated discretion in a lot of things we do. Have you ever listened to folks saying, well, I'm just brutally honest? I heard that people say, I'm just brutally honest. I just tell it how it is. And we use that as an excuse for a lack of discretion. Nehemiah could have said it how it was. Hey, I should be sad. I'll tell you why I'm sad there, big chief. I'm sad because you gave an order that burned the walls and the city gates to the ground, and the city in which I love, Jerusalem, is now defenseless due to your order. Put that in your pipe and smoke it. He would be dead after that. We look at discretion as a means of, well, we're not being honest. No, look. Honesty is telling the truth. We take rudeness and cruelty as the idea of being honest. Well, I'm just brutally honest. No, what you really are, you're rude and you're crude. Right? Ladies, it's kind of like when you ask your husband, does this dress make me look bad? By the way, that's playing Russian roulette with all the chambers loaded. We're not winning this one. Honesty is, I don't think you ought to wear that outfit, but if you want to wear it, it looks nice. Brutal honesty is, it ain't the dress. Think about it. It'll catch up to you. Think about it. Boom. We live in a culture where we think discretion is not as more prized as absolute blunt honesty. Well, here's the thing. Go read Proverbs chapter 3 and read what the Bible says about discretion, wisdom, knowledge, and skill. Nehemiah is using a great deal of discretion. He is not trying to trick the king and letting the king give him permission to have things and then get over there and say, well, the king told me I could go to Judah and rebuild the walls, but I didn't tell him which city. The king knows which city Nehemiah is from. He knows the fortification, which is near the temple. He's aware of these things. It's his kingdom. He's aware of what's going on. But what Nehemiah is doing is allowing the king to have maneuver room with discretion, where the king will allow him to go and do what he needs to do. And so instead of sitting there and picking a fight with the powerful man that he is before, he uses discretion and says, look, my father's tomb is in disgrace. My city is in distress. I'm not blaming you, although you are the root of the problem. I'm not going to directly blame you. And so he allows the king this maneuver. Now watch this. Then the king said to me, what would you request? So I prayed to the God of heaven, and I said to the king, if it pleases the king, and if your servant has found favor, send me to Judah. You say, well, he says Judah. Yes, Judah is the territory. Jerusalem is the city. To Judah, to the city of my father's tomb, that I may rebuild it. The king said to me, the queen sitting beside him, how long will your journey be, and when will you return? So the king says, what do you want? You look sad, you look despondent, the city of your family is in ruins. What do you want? Now Nehemiah does something that a lot of us don't do anymore. In the instance that happens, he stops and he prays and he asks God for wisdom. So often when we are put in a position when people ask us what we want, we immediately jump into the laundry list of things that we want to have. Or we look and we haven't thought through the action. You can tell by what Nehemiah asked for, he has thought through what he's going to ask the king for. Typically when we're asked questions about what do you want, you go, well, I don't know. I should think, let me think about that for a minute. Hold on. Well, how long will you be gone? Well, let's see, it's 4 weeks to get there. We'll walk around the city for 3 days. 3 days. And then I want to build, it might take a couple weeks. 4 weeks, I got to work with the unions on that. It's 6 weeks. And then I got to cut trees down. I got to turn that into lumber. That's 8 weeks, carry the 1, 2. I don't know, about 3.5 years. Well, that's not going to fly with this guy. He's asking for a specific time. Nehemiah's already thought this through. And he has, when you look at the answers, he gives very specific answers to what the king requests. How long are you going to be gone? Nehemiah says, I gave him a definite answer. It pleased the king to let me go because I gave him a definite answer. I didn't say, well, I don't know, 5, maybe 6, maybe 10 years, I think. We miss out when we go and ask people for things, or when people ask us what we want. We haven't taken the proper time to think about the things that we need. And it's the same when you go to grow a church or build a church. Everybody's got their own pet projects. Everybody got their own desire, what we want. But as a church as a whole, Dad, we sat and thought about, what do we want/need? And can we articulate it when asked by those who have the means by which to provide it? What do I want/need in my own personal life when I'm asked by people that can provide it? Do we simply just go, well, I don't know. And see, we're socially conditioned now when people ask us, hey, what do you need? To say, oh, I don't need anything. Right? Go back to 2 women fighting over a check. That's a classic commercial. No, I'll pay the check. No, I'll pay the check. You want to pay the check? You knock yourself out, pay for the check. We're classically and socially conditioned to say nothing. I'm reminded when I was a young boy, the church that I was in West Virginia had just built a large sanctuary. And they had a spot for a grand piano like that one right over there, but they had an upright in it. And which looked kind of odd, but that's all we could afford at the time. And so the pastor played golf with a man who was not a Christian every Saturday morning for years and years and years. And somewhere along the spectrum of his life, something happened in his life, and on one Saturday morning he accepted Christ as his Savior. And then years and years continued on. And while they were out there playing, he stopped and says, what does Johnson Chapel need? This man was fairly wealthy. And the pastor looked at him and says, we need a baby grand piano. That's what we need. We got a spot for it, but we're playing with an upright. That's the only thing we've been saving our money for. Just by the time we save our money, something breaks in the church, and we have to allocate the money somewhere else. And he says, that's what we need. We've been wanting one for about 10 years. We don't have it. The man out of his riches bought it. But the pastor knew what he needed. And was able to articulate it to the person in church. What do you need, Nehemiah, to carry out this task? And how long will you be gone? Folks, these questions are the questions you and I face every day for when folks come to us and say, what do you want? And we haven't put the proper time in to sit and go, what do I want? What do I need? If someone were to come and to provide for me the things I need, what do I need? And yet we hem-haw around and we try with some false humility to say, well, I really don't need anything, when it's just not true. Let's continue looking here. How long will your journey be? It said, please the king, because I gave him a definite time. And then I said to the king, if it pleased the king, notice he didn't stop there. Let me go, how long will it be? Notice he didn't stop at the request. Once the king says, what do you want? He says, well, I want to go home and I want to rebuild the wall, but what else do you want? I want letters given to the governors of the provinces beyond the river that allow me to pass through until I come to Judah. Why? Because those are the ones that lied about the city being rebuilt, and lied about the walls and the purpose for why the walls were being rebuilt, and lied about the purpose of the reason why the gates were being built, and lied about the intent of the Jewish people, saying that they were going to break away and rebel, when in reality they were trying to just simply defend their own homeland against the individuals that lied about them. I need letters of safe passage and conduct. Why? Because you've already given a decree saying that if you rebuild the wall, or that the wall must stop being built and be taken down. If I go and start rebuilding it, the same individuals are going to act on the first decree and flatten the wall. So I need letters of safe passage telling people why I'm here. And a letter to Asaph, the keeper of the king's forest, that to give me timber for the beams, for the gates of the fortress, which is by the temple, and for the wall of the city, and for the house that I'll go into. Specific answers. I need wood to rebuild the fortress near the temple. The king knows the city. Notice Nehemiah never mentions it by name. He mentions it by location. He mentions it by what's in it. He mentions it by what he wants to do, but he never mentions it by name. Because he understands the history that is surrounding the name of the city. If you simply mention the city of Jerusalem, the king is now going to say, no. But he's specific. I need beams for the fortress. I need beams for the city wall. Now notice what happens here. And the king granted them all to me because I was sufficient enough at convincing the king that this was a good plan. No, that's not in there. That it looked like a good idea for the king to do because I was eloquent in speech. Nope. Because I was an excellent planner and had it all thought out, and the king liked my plan and the 3 courses of actions that I presented before him. Nope. Because the good hand of God was upon me. Go back to the end of chapter 1 and the prayer that Nehemiah prays, asking God, first of all, for the forgiveness of the sin of the people, and for the petition for the Lord to grant him compassion before this king, so that the king would be allowed the ability to reverse the decision that he had ordered the wall to be destroyed. Notice that Nehemiah gives credit to the God who brought this about. It wasn't that Nehemiah was that eloquent of a speaker, that he utilized his position of power, that he was able to do all these things and convince the king because his ancestors lived in tombs, or whatever the historical argument may be. The answer is, God gave it to me out of God's good graces. And if you look at what Nehemiah requests, if we look at it and we say, well, that's not that much. Look, at that time of the world, Nehemiah is asking the king for more than what a man really ought to. He's asking for the impossible. And when we go and see in subsequent chapters at the rate in which they rebuild the wall and how they do it, Nehemiah achieves the impossible. You know why he's able to do that? Because he doesn't ask of God what is only possible in the realms of human endeavors. Nehemiah asks for what is impossible. He's asking for the most powerful man in the world to reverse a decision. God give him compassion. He's asking for the most powerful man in the world to open up his treasured forest so that he can cut timber down. He's asking for the most powerful man in the world who trusts him implicitly with his own life to allow him to be God. He asks the impossible in these situations. We look at it and blow over and go, this isn't looking possible. In this era, at that time, what Nehemiah is asking this king to do would fit in the realm of impossibility. One of the reasons why we fail at times in our own Christian life is we ask God for what is only possible through our own strength. We have a God that delivers the impossible. And yet we only look at the possible. And we ask for only the possible. And then we're shocked that when God gives us the possible. When yet in reality, what we really ought to be asking God for are the things that are impossible beyond our own abilities. Because folks, here's the thing. The great thing about miracles is if we could do it in our own strength, look at the great miracles that are done. They are things that are supernatural, that everyone recognizes, well, this is a miracle. Peter walking upon the water. That's what's in the realm of the impossibility. And yet he does. 5 loaves and 2 fishes. Feeding a multitude. We look at the world in which we are in, and we look at it only through the means by the power by which we possess, and we ask for only by the means by the power by which we possess. And then we're shocked that when we only get X number. But notice it's specific too. He asks for specified things. Folks, when we pray, when we ask God for things, we need to be specific. It's kind of like the catch-all "be with." I have yet to understand what "be with this person" means. And not "be with this person as they do." See, that's specific. Be with them as they do. That's a specific request. But I've heard, and we use it as a filler, "Lord, be with this person." How? Why? Robert Kipling said, "I have 6 friends that serve me well. They're who, what, when, why, and how." When we pray, that's a great way of doing it. Who, what, when, why, how. Nehemiah asks all these questions. Notice that the king anticipates this when we follow on the second half of the verse, or on the last half of the verse. The king anticipates why Nehemiah asked for the letters for the governor. And it came about that it came to the governors of the provinces beyond the river, and gave to them the king's letter. Now the king said, "Sent with me officers of the army and horsemen." And when Sanballat the Horonite and Tobiah the Amorite officials heard about it, they were very displeased that someone had came seeking the welfare of the sons of Israel. These men will constantly be a thorn in the side of Nehemiah. The king sends these men with Nehemiah to validate the letter that is being sent. Not only is Nehemiah here with a valid letter from me, but I have sent officials from my court to ensure that Nehemiah is unmolested as he goes. It's really quite odd that a king would do that. It's really quite odd that Artaxerxes would let that happen. Because if you go back to the history that we went through in chapter 1, this area is known as a hotbed of controversy, and he is not thrilled about having a province so close to Egypt that would like to break away. And so the king sends horsemen to ensure that Nehemiah's plan is not thwarted. What do we ask for when we ask God for the things we want? Do we ask for simply the things that our hands can provide with just a little bit of help? Or do we ask God for the impossibilities and expect God to deliver them? I'm not here talking about health and wealth where you give God $20, he's going to give you $2,000. Folks, that stuff's just wrong. We were here on Wednesday night. We looked at that Wednesday night. It's just wrong. It's based upon a greed-based equation with God. But notice back in chapter 1, Nehemiah began to pray and ask God to conform him to the will of God. And when the king asked, "What do you want?" he prays again and asks God for guidance, and then tells the king, "This is what I want." And what he asks the king to do is an impossibility, because the king has already given a decree that the wall needs to be stopped. And then yet sends Nehemiah anyway to begin to rebuild the wall. What do we ask God for in our prayers? Only the things that are possible. Or are we asking for the things that are impossible, that only he can provide, and only he can grant us favor and compassion and mercy before the others that we go before? Whether or not we're as a church of Skyline, in our personal lives in which we walk, within our families, within our community. What do we ask God for? And what do we expect of this great and wonderful God? Let's pray. Our gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day, for this opportunity to come before you. Heavenly Father, for the, at times, lack of faith that we have in your ability to provide. In that we ask too little and too small of a God who is far greater and far gracious than we are willing to tap into. I ask you with each and every one of us as we continue to grow as a church, that as we begin to pray in the direction where we go, that we ask of you that which is impossible. Expecting the impossible. Because if it can be done in our hands, then it's really not much of from you. We ask you to be with each and every one of us here and for the hurts and the requests that we have. That you will be with each and every one of us in those requests and hurts and needs. You know them, spoken and not. We ask for your grace upon us. In your name we pray. Amen. If you've been here for a couple weeks or a couple months, and you say, I kind of like the church, I kind of like what was going on, and you've thought about joining our congregation, or if today's your first day and you say, I'd like to make Skyline my home, today as the band plays, I'd like to open the opportunity for you, if you're interested, to come forward and talk with me. If you'd like to come forward and just talk with me about something on your heart, like a prayer request, I'll be here at the front as the band plays.
The cross upon which Jesus died is a shelter in which we can hide, and its grace so free is sufficient for me, and deep is its fountain, as wide as the sea. There's room at the cross for you. There's room at the cross for you. Though millions have come, there's still room for one. Yes, there's room at the cross for you. Though millions have found him a friend, and have turned from their sins they have sinned, the Savior still waits to open the gates and welcome us in before it's too late. There's room at the cross for you. There's room at the cross for you. Though millions have come, there's still room for one. Yes, there's room at the cross for you.
Thank you all for coming, and hope you have a blessed Sunday afternoon. Excited to see you come back this evening as we're going to the book of Ruth. So at this time, we'll go ahead and dismiss you all out. You guys got a song?
We're going to close real quick by singing the chorus for Come Now Is the Time to Worship. So you want to stand and join us?